got a lot of stuff to catch up on today, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start off with the Julio Jones trade talk that kind of surfaced over the past couple of days. Kind of weird in the sense that Julio Jones was on the Undisputed Show with Shannon and Skip Bayless. And apparently he didn't know that he was being recorded when he said this, but he said in response to the rumors that Atlanta was trading him that he is wanting out of Atlanta. He is for sure gone. He's not coming back to Atlanta. And part of me, the football fan, is a little bit disappointed, because I really, really was looking forward to Kyle Pitts and Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley all being on the same field together for Atlanta. I felt like that would have just been an offensive masterpiece to watch, and that would have been exciting television. But apparently Julio Jones doesn't like fun. I'm kidding. I'm sure he probably is sick with, not being able to get back to the playoffs since, obviously that one Super Bowl. And it's unfortunate for football fans that we won't be able to get to see the Julio Jones-Kyle Pitts combination. But now that we do know that Jones is going to be traded, I want to take a look at what I think are his best destinations, his best landing spots, because reportedly Atlanta has been receiving a bunch of calls for Julio. They've got a bunch of offers. Teams have reportedly offered as much as a first-round pick for Julio Jones, which is incredible considering the fact that he is 32. He does have 12,896 receiving yards, 60 touchdowns, and 848 receptions in 10 years in the league. His 848 receptions are good for third most among active receivers in the NFL, and reportedly as well, the New England Patriots are the favorites to land Julio Jones, supposedly, which if that's the case, oh my God. That is a scary thought for the AFC, if Julio Jones ends up going to a completely revamped New England Patriots offense. And if you want to talk about big expenditures for Bill Belichick in revamping this offense, I feel like Julio Jones would be the cherry on top. He's got a $15 million price tag on him, especially after the June 1st designation. I think that number comes down a little bit, but Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, N'Keal Harry, Jacoby Myers, and Julio Jones, that's a pretty damn good receiving core. Obviously, it's a little bit top-heavy with Julio Jones and Nelson Aguilar, which Nelson Aguilar is a third, wide receiver in most cases. Hey, doesn't matter. If you're Cam Newton or Mac Jones, with this type of talent coming in to play with in comparison to what Cam Newton had last year, even if Julio Jones doesn't go to New England, that's still a much improved offense, not to mention the two tight ends. I almost completely forgot about Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry as well. That's an incredible offense to go with, and that's just going to be incredibly difficult to stop next year for the New England Patriots if that goes through. But whereas the New England Patriots are the favorites to land Julio Jones, I've got a couple other teams that I have on the list here as potential suitors for Julio Jones that I think make a lot of sense. And I kind of just wanted to run through it really quickly to start the show today and talk about why I think that these destinations would be good for Julio Jones. Now, I think an important distinction to make is that Julio Jones has said that he wants to go to a contender. His problem with the Atlanta Falcons is not, love lost or anything. It's the fact that they have not been able to compete ever since they lost in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. It's been hard for them to get back. They've been bottom of the barrel in the NFC South for a couple of seasons now. It's been rough going in Atlanta, and Julio Jones has had enough. He's getting to that point in his career where he probably would want to move on to greener pastures to try and get himself a ring before all is said and done. So as I said, I did have a small group of teams here that I think would be a good destination for Julio Jones and are viable trade partners. And to start it off, I think that the Detroit Lions are a really good selection for Atlanta and Julio Jones. And we've just finished talking about Detroit in the last show and why I'm so excited for what, Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions have in store and what they're going to be doing in the future. The one thing that I did nitpick and point out, though, is that they didn't really address their wide receiver need in the NFL draft like I thought they would. They had Penei Sewell fall to them at 7. I had them mocked to take a wide receiver in that case. Hell, if Penei Sewell didn't fall to them at 7, I imagine that they probably would have taken a wide receiver. Detroit has lost Kenny Golladay, they lost Marvin Jones Jr., and they lost Mohamed Sanu as well. Detroit is in desperate need of wide receiver help, and not only do they have multiple first-round picks to be able to give to Atlanta, if the price tag was that much, obviously if, the reported offer so far has been that it's been one first-round pick, so they do have first-round picks to give up and still have a plethora left over from the trade with Matthew Stafford and the LA Rams. Not only do they have the required haul that Atlanta might find attractive, but heck, they need a wide receiver, and that's the biggest need for the Detroit Lions right now, arguably. So that makes sense. I don't think that Julio Jones would exactly be thrilled to be going to Detroit, because it's not exactly like they're a contending franchise at the moment, but that's option number one. Option number two is the Baltimore Ravens. Julio Jones and Sammy Watkins together sounds like an extremely scary starting wide receiver combination, and the Ravens are a playoff contender. The Ravens were mostly unable to get a free agent wide receiver. They got Sammy Watkins in late, but there still is room for improvement. Again, Ravens were last in the league last year when it comes to their wide receiver efficiency. So Julio Jones obviously would make it that much better. And again, the Ravens are a playoff contender. So when it comes to Julio Jones's wishes of going to a playoff contender, not only are the Ravens in the AFC East, which obviously if you're Atlanta, you do not want to be trading Julio Jones to an NFC team if you can help it. Not only are the Ravens in the AFC East, Julio Jones and Sammy Watkins sounds like a scary combination. Lamar Jackson is probably a fun quarterback to play for. I imagine that Julio Jones added to the Ravens offense would make them incredibly scary. They are option number two. Option number three is the Colts for essentially the same reason as the Ravens, but a little bit different when it comes to the quarterback position. You're bringing in Carson Wentz, who is going to need a revamped, and basically he's going to need all the help that he can get to really deliver Indianapolis to higher highs than they got last season. They do have Ty Hilton, Paris Campbell, Michael, I can't remember the last guy's name for the life of me at the moment, but the Colts do have some wide receivers there. T.Y. Hilton especially. Adding Julio Jones would be a great weapon for Carson Wentz. They're a playoff contender. The Colts didn't spend too much in free agency last season like I thought they would, so they are going to have the money to be able to spend and take on Julio Jones's contract. I don't know whether or not they would be able to be willing to give up the first round pick that's being asked for Julio Jones. But again, for the same reason that you would want to go to the Ravens and why Atlanta would want to trade him to the Colts, it's a team in the opposite conference. They're able to take on the contract easily enough. They probably have some draft capital left over to be able to give you enough for Julio. And if you're Julio, Wentz is, I don't think he's that great of a quarterback, but obviously that's a little bit of recency bias. But Wentz is going to need a weapon. You're going to have familiar or at least equally as reliable wide receivers there in T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, and the like. And, it's a playoff contending team, so Colts are number 4. Number 5, the Panthers. And again, the Panthers, your interest in Julio Jones is that you're going to need to give Sam Darnold weapons. Sam Darnold never really had any weapons in New York. Now, Carolina does already have some weapons. They do have, Robbie Anderson. I almost completely blanked on that as well. And they do have DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey. Julio Jones would be that vertical threat for Sam Darnold to throw to. The Panthers are probably the least likely option. I think they would be interested in Jones to replace Samuel, who went to Washington on the offseason. But the Panthers do need to get a weapon for Sam Darnold, and or at least an advanced weapon for Sam Darnold. And I think that it would be a pretty viable idea for the Panthers to go after Julio Jones. I just don't think that the Panthers, are going to be willing to spend that much money and that much draft capital after they already spent a lot of draft capital to go and trade for Sam Darnold. It's just a fun idea to give Darnold an extra weapon, and they also are in the same division. So, logically speaking, it's a fun idea, and I think it would be a good destination for Julio, but there's no way that the Atlanta Falcons are trading him within the division. The last team that I have on the list is the 49ers, and the 49ers are a fun one because not only are they Super Bowl contenders, they are probably going to be one of the best teams in the league next season, but the prospect of Julio Jones reuniting with Kyle Shanahan is, that's money. That's such a good sounding proposition. And they are a little bit dry on draft picks momentarily. They would probably have to give some kind of combination of a second, third round, or fourth round, a multi-pick package to Atlanta for them to be able to bite on it. Also, a big negative is that they're in the NFC. And again, Atlanta have said that they don't want to trade him within conference. But again, Julio Jones wants to go to a contender. The 49ers are absolutely Super Bowl contenders. It would make them absolutely deadly. Imagine being Trey Lance, inheriting not only Deebo Samuel, but Brandon Ayuk as well, and then Julio Jones, and then, as well, George Kittle. Great offense to inherit, and I think Julio Jones would be very, very fascinating in San Francisco. So that's kind of the small group of teams that I have that seem viable, but or at least would be fun to see Julio Jones be traded to that team. So again, Detroit, Baltimore, Indianapolis, Carolina, and the 49ers. Where would you like to see Julio Jones land? Again, I feel really, really saddened by the fact that, we're not going to be able to see Julio Jones and Kyle Pitts play together on the same field, but hey, if you're Atlanta, Kyle Pitts is probably a generational talent at tight end, could play the wideout position as well, so you do have a pretty decent replacement for Julio Jones. I just would have rather had them being, teammates instead of one being the replacement for the other, so kind of sad. But where would you like to see Julio Jones go to? Do you have any preferences? Do you agree with my selections? Let me know. I'm interested to see where he's going to be going. We're going to be finding out in the next couple of days, because June 1st is just right around the corner, and we might have some spicy trades coming up very, very soon. Hey folks, thank you so much for listening to this segment from the Hard-Headed Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed this segment, make sure that you drop a like on the video and a comment. It helps me out a bunch. And if you're interested in watching more segments like this from the show after the show has been completed, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Once again, thank you so much for watching the video. My name is Nick Ryan, and I will see you all again very soon.